So in this video, I will show you how to do a hunter braid on Stella. She was my school horse that I used. It took me a long time to learn to braid. I could never braid before this class. Here is a running braid we did on her just for fun before I pulled her mane. My first attempt at a forelock braid. It didn't come out the best, but I was learning. Here's something you could use to help practice if your school horse isn't available, because they are often used in other activities. Here is my first attempt at braids. They did not come out the best, but they did get better. Here's something that my boyfriend actually made for me to help practice, and it actually helped a lot. So here we go. First, you need to make sure the mane is pulled and even. If there's any pieces that are longer, you need to make sure they're pulled so the whole mane is even. You do this by back combing the hair, and then once it's back combed, you take the chunk that is longer and you just rip it out. It really doesn't hurt them because they don't have too many nerves in their mane, but you still shouldn't do it for too long because it can hurt eventually. You should always start with a clean, dry, brushed out mane. Her mane is not as clean as it should have been because this day was the Sunday of the show and it was about 20 degrees in the barn, very cold. My hands were freezing and I'm sure she was cold too, so I didn't want to make her any more uncomfortable than she had to be. But normally I would have used water with her mane to make it a little bit cleaner, or some bathe in a bottle, something like that. So first you want to have your pieces cut, and then you can put them in the halter just for easy access. I cut my pieces a little bit longer because here's the quick braid that you should use. You shouldn't always use it on a dark mane because it can make it look a little bit dandruffy. But first spray it in your hand, not directly onto their mane, so that it doesn't get where you don't want it to go, so it's a little bit more controlled. So spray in your hand, rub it in their mane to make it a little bit stickier. All right, there we go, rubbing in the mane. You can also use water. And then you can use your separator to make sure that you get even parts of the mane. You don't want them too big or too small. It does depend on the size of your horse's neck, what size you want them. For a finer neck, a little bit thicker. For a thick neck, you want them a little bit smaller. So for Stella, she has a pretty thick neck, but you did them about medium size. So you separate an even piece of hair and put the other hair to the side. And for me, I start with the yarn in the mane from the first off because I was having trouble braiding in the pieces at the end like most people do. So this is something that I do that just helps me so I don't have to worry about that step. So I put the yarn in the middle of the hair like you would with a rubber band in your ponytail. And then I tie it, and then I take the two ends that are on the side and I take them and then I just incorporate them into the hair from the start. So you just braid like you would a regular braid, crossing over, and then make sure that you pull it very tight because you don't want it too loose because you have a lot of other steps that are coming. You just want to make sure that it's very tight. So keep braiding. All right, and then you cross over the yarn and you pull it through the hole. This is something else that for some reason I struggle with. I don't know why, but you want to make sure that it's all the way down at the end. And yep, so again, take that yarn, loop it over. You can do both pieces at the same time, but I just do this just to make sure it's secure. So first you want to make sure that your braids are even. Make sure that not one's longer than the other. Then you take your latch hook, pull it through with the yarn, grab the yarn, pull it through, make sure you're only pulling through the hair. Then you take your two strings, loop them like you would if you're tying a shoe, but with an extra loop, so you want to do two loops. Then you do it through the bottom. This one I actually messed up, so you can watch one of my mistakes, because you shouldn't loop it through on the top the second time around, so you don't want to do this. And we'll find out why. So then you loop it through, then you go to the middle and try to make a bump. But when you do it twice, it makes the bump a little bit too tall and big on her head, so it doesn't look that good, as you can see right there. So then we will try again, see what happens. So you take your latch hook, make sure it's down. After that, you grab the two pieces of yarn, then close your latch hook, pull the yarn through, only the yarn. Make sure the hair tails are tucked under, no loose hair. Then you take the 2 pieces of yarn and then you cross it over with your 2 loops. Then you only want to tie it on the bottom first. So make sure it's secure on the bottom. Push that tail, make sure it's not showing. And then you want to secure that, tie it tight, not too tight though. Then you want to do your 2 loops again. Make sure your horse is standing still if you can. Then, so you tie it tight. You hold the bump in the middle. Then you tie your piece of yarn in the middle of the braid. So you bump it, but it's tied in the middle. Then you want to take it and tie it behind just for extra security. So this part you do tie once in the front and once in the back, but this is the only step you would do that. Then you take your scissors. I have some small ones that work really well, and you want to cut close to the bump, but obviously not cutting any of the mane, just the yarn. To take the braids out, you want to have a seam ripper, which you can buy at a craft store along with your latch hook. So you take the seam ripper and you just cut that yarn, and make sure you're not cutting any of the mane so it's not uneven. You just want to cut the yarn, and you should go in the hair direction so you're not pulling out any of the mane. But sometimes it just doesn't work. And then you want to make sure that you comb out all the pieces of yarn so there's not any left in your horse's mane. And you also want to make sure that you didn't leave any yarn on the floor of their stall so they don't accidentally eat it. This shows what your mane should look like when you do the whole mane and forelock. I didn't do her whole mane on the day of this video because the barn was so cold. My hands were barely working and she was cold, so as an example, but these show what your horse should look like on the day of the show. And maybe your horse will win a ribbon, and there Stella is looking pretty and happy at the end of the show.